In the early hours of a crisp October morning, the opulent penthouse of Jonathan Hartley on Manhattan's Upper East Side lay shrouded in silence. The sun had just begun its ascent over the skyline, casting a soft golden light on the meticulously decorated interiors. It was a world far removed from the grim reality that was about to unfold within these walls. Jonathan Hartley, a towering figure in the world of finance, had passed away suddenly. At 65 years old, Jonathan had accumulated a vast fortune through a combination of shrewd investments, aggressive business tactics, and a keen understanding of the stock market. His success had not only made him a wealthy man, but had also earned him the respect and admiration of many. However, it had also bred envy and resentment among those closest to him. Jonathan's family was composed of 4 children and his wife, all of whom had their own complex relationships with him. His wife, Evelyn Hartley, was a graceful woman in her early 60s who had dedicated much of her life to philanthropy and high society events. She had married Jonathan when she was 25, and their relationship, though initially based on love, had become strained over the years. The couple's marriage had weathered many storms, but Evelyn's quiet grace often masked her own discontent. The Hartleys' eldest child, Rebecca, was 43 years old. A highly successful attorney, Rebecca had always been seen as the most independent and driven of Jonathan's children. She had a reputation for being fiercely competitive and had spent much of her career in the public eye. Her relationship with her father had been strained for years, stemming from a series of disagreements over his business practices and her own aspirations to distance herself from the family fortune. David, the second child, was 41 years old and had followed a different path. Unlike his sister, David had chosen to pursue a career in the arts. His passion for painting and sculpture was well known, but so was his dependence on his father's financial support. Despite their differing career paths, David had always been close to Jonathan, though their relationship had grown tense in recent years due to David's inability to achieve the same level of success as his father. The third child, Emily, was 38 and had married into the Hartley family 5 years prior. Emily had been a former socialite and had used her marriage to gain entry into the upper echelons of New York society. Her relationship with Jonathan was complicated, marked by a mixture of respect and a desire for his approval. She had been involved in numerous charity events and social circles, often using her connections to advance her own interests. The youngest child, Ethan, was 35 years old and had a complicated relationship with both his father and the family's wealth. Ethan had struggled to find his place in the world, often appearing as the black sheep of the family. His own ventures had been less successful, and he was known for his erratic behavior and financial instability. His turbulent relationship with Jonathan was marked by frequent arguments and a deep-seated resentment towards the way he had been treated by his father. The morning of Jonathan's death began like any other. Evelyn had woken early, as was her habit, and had gone to the kitchen to prepare a light breakfast. Jonathan, who had been a heavy sleeper, remained in bed. When Evelyn checked on him later that morning, she found him unresponsive. Despite her frantic attempts to revive him and the rapid arrival of emergency responders, Jonathan was pronounced dead at the scene. The initial conclusion was that Jonathan had died of a heart attack, a condition for which he had been treated for several years. However, the circumstances surrounding his death seemed too convenient, and the police were called in to investigate further. The Hartleys' penthouse was soon filled with the bustle of police officers, detectives, and forensic experts, all working to piece together the details of Jonathan's final moments. Detective Laura Mitchell, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving high-profile cases, was assigned to lead the investigation. Her initial assessment was straightforward, a seemingly natural death of a wealthy man. But as she began her investigation, she noticed inconsistencies that warranted further scrutiny. The medical examiner's report revealed that Jonathan had not only suffered a heart attack, but had also been exposed to a high level of a rare, fast-acting poison. This discovery contradicted the initial assumption of a natural death and suggested foul play. The investigation began to focus on those closest to Jonathan, his family, each of whom had a potential motive and access to the penthouse. Detective Mitchell interviewed each member of the Hartley family, starting with Evelyn. She described her husband as a loving but demanding man, whose health had been declining over the past few years. Evelyn's account of Jonathan's final moments was consistent with the timeline of his death, but her emotional detachment and composure raised some questions. Rebecca Hartley, the eldest daughter, was next. She had been working late the night before at her law firm and had arrived at the penthouse only after Jonathan's death was discovered. Her alibi was solid, but her strained relationship with her father made her a person of interest. Rebecca had long resented Jonathan's control over the family's financial empire and had openly criticized his management decisions. David Hartley was the next to be questioned. He had been staying at a nearby studio apartment and had visited the penthouse frequently. His erratic behavior and recent financial struggles made him a possible suspect. David had often argued with Jonathan about money and had expressed his frustration with his father's expectations. Emily, Jonathan's daughter-in-law, was also interviewed. Her account was less clear, as she had been attending a charity event the night before and had arrived at the penthouse after Jonathan was found dead. Her desire to maintain her social status and secure her place in the Hartley family fortune added complexity to her motives. Finally, Ethan Hartley, the youngest child, was questioned. Ethan's troubled history and financial instability had created a rift between him and Jonathan. He had been seen arguing with his father in the weeks leading up to Jonathan's death, and his recent behavior suggested a deep resentment that could have driven him to commit such a crime. As Detective Mitchell delved deeper into the lives of the Hartley family, it became clear that each member had secrets and motives that complicated the investigation. The seemingly perfect facade of the Hartley family began to crumble, revealing a web of deceit, betrayal, and hidden agendas. The death of Jonathan Hartley was no longer just a tragic incident. It was the beginning of a high-stakes investigation that would unravel the darkest aspects of the Hartley family's dynamics and secrets. As the investigation into Jonathan Hartley's death deepened, Detective Laura Mitchell was determined to uncover the truth behind the seemingly natural demise of the wealthy financier. The initial findings had pointed to foul play, but it was crucial to piece together the intricate details that could reveal the true culprit. With each passing day, the Hartley family's carefully constructed facade of normalcy began to crack, exposing a web of deception and unresolved grievances. Detective Mitchell began by revisiting the interviews with the Hartley family, scrutinizing their statements and behaviors more closely. Each family member's motives, connections, and potential opportunities to commit the crime were examined meticulously. Evelyn Hartley, Jonathan's wife, had been the first to find him dead. Her account of the events leading up to Jonathan's death was consistent, but her emotions were under scrutiny. Evelyn had described Jonathan as a demanding yet loving husband who had been suffering from health problems. Despite this, her calm demeanor during the investigation seemed almost too composed. Evelyn had been deeply involved in the family's charity work and social circles, and her public image was impeccable. However, the strain in her marriage and the possibility of her benefiting from Jonathan's death through insurance policies and inheritance were areas that required further exploration. Rebecca Hartley, the eldest daughter, had been seen as a successful attorney with a sharp mind and a strong will. Her relationship with her father had been tumultuous, marked by public disputes and private resentment. Rebecca had always felt overshadowed by Jonathan's business successes and had longed for independence. She had also been critical of Jonathan's control over the family's fortune and had expressed her dissatisfaction with his management. Detective Mitchell found Rebecca's motives compelling but needed to verify her alibi and assess the depth of her potential involvement. David Hartley, the second child, was an artist struggling with financial difficulties. His relationship with Jonathan had been characterized by tension and conflict over money. David had been financially dependent on his father's support, which had led to frequent arguments. His recent financial struggles and his reliance on Jonathan for stability painted a picture of desperation. David's alibi was less solid compared to Rebecca's, and his financial situation gave him a potential motive to eliminate Jonathan to gain access to the family's wealth. Emily Hartley, Jonathan's daughter-in-law, had been a socialite before her marriage. Her recent arrival in the family and her involvement in charity events made her position somewhat precarious. Emily had been seen at a charity function on the night before Jonathan's death, but the event's timing and her access to the penthouse were under scrutiny. Her desire to maintain her social standing and secure her place in the Hartley family's fortune added a layer of complexity to her involvement in the case. Ethan Hartley, the youngest child, was perhaps the most enigmatic figure. His troubled past and strained relationship with Jonathan made him a key suspect. Ethan had been vocal about his discontent with Jonathan's control over the family's wealth and had been involved in numerous disputes with his father. His erratic behavior and financial instability made him a likely candidate for someone who might resort to extreme measures to resolve his grievances. Ethan's recent actions and statements were examined closely to determine if they could link him to Jonathan's death. As Detective Mitchell delved deeper, the forensic evidence began to play a crucial role in the investigation. The toxicology report had revealed the presence of a rare and fast-acting poison in Jonathan's system. This poison was not commonly available and required a precise application, indicating that the perpetrator had a certain level of expertise or access. The forensic team had also conducted a thorough examination of the penthouse. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Jonathan had known his attacker. Additionally, the security camera footage from the building's lobby and hallways was reviewed, revealing that none of the family members had accessed the penthouse in a manner that raised immediate suspicion. However, the footage did show that someone had tampered with the security system just before Jonathan's death, indicating a planned and deliberate act. Detective Mitchell focused on the poison used in the murder. The substance had been traced back to a specialty chemical supplier with a limited number of clients. The investigation into the supplier revealed that the poison had been purchased under a false name, but the pattern of the purchase suggested that it was likely acquired by someone with access to high-end chemical supplies or someone within the family's social circle. Uncovering hidden agendas as the investigation progressed, Detective Mitchell's team began to uncover hidden agendas and long-buried secrets. The Hartley family's wealth and status had masked deep-seated conflicts and personal struggles that were now coming to light. Evelyn Hartley's involvement in charitable activities was scrutinized, revealing that she had been heavily involved in managing the family's philanthropic endeavors. Despite her outward calm, Evelyn had been under significant pressure due to financial mismanagement within the charity. The possibility that she might have been motivated to eliminate Jonathan to protect her public image or secure her own financial future was explored. Rebecca's career and public persona were examined, revealing that her dissatisfaction with Jonathan had extended beyond personal grievances. Her legal battles and criticisms of Jonathan's business decisions had created a public rift that could be seen as a motive. The investigation also revealed that Rebecca had been considering a legal challenge to Jonathan's will, which could have significantly altered her inheritance. David Hartley's financial difficulties were a focal point of the investigation. His reliance on Jonathan's support had created a precarious situation, and the pressure to secure his financial future could have driven him to drastic measures. David's recent art sales and the significant debts he had accumulated were investigated to determine if they could provide a motive for murder. Emily's involvement in high society and her recent marriage to Jonathan's son created a complex web of social and financial interests. Her desire to maintain her status and secure her position within the Hartley family was a potential motive. The investigation into her charity work and social connections revealed that she had been involved in several high-profile events, raising questions about her role and potential involvement in Jonathan's death. Ethan Hartley's erratic behavior and financial instability made him a prime suspect. His recent actions, including threats made against Jonathan and his desperate financial situation, painted a troubling picture. Ethan's volatile nature and his history of conflicts with Jonathan provided a strong motive, but proving his involvement required solid evidence. The turning point in the investigation came when Detective Mitchell's team uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. An anonymous tip led them to a storage unit rented under an alias. Inside the unit, they found several items linked to the poison used in Jonathan's murder, along with personal correspondence that indicated a planned attack on Jonathan. The evidence pointed to a specific individual with both the means and motive to carry out the crime. With this new evidence, Detective Mitchell focused on identifying the person behind the alias. The investigation into the storage unit's rental records and the connections to the Hartley family led them to a startling revelation. The individual behind the alias was someone with a direct link to the family, a person whose actions and motives aligned closely with the details of Jonathan's death. As Detective Mitchell prepared to confront the suspect, the investigation was on the brink of revealing the truth behind Jonathan Hartley's death. The intricate web of family dynamics, hidden motives, and forensic evidence had set the stage for a dramatic conclusion, with the resolution of the case resting on the final revelations yet to come. As the investigation into Jonathan Hartley's death reached its climax, Detective Laura Mitchell was poised to uncover the truth. The evidence gathered had painted a complex picture of the Hartley family, each member harboring their own secrets and motives. The anonymous tip about the storage unit had provided a critical breakthrough, pointing to a key suspect. It was time for Detective Mitchell to bring the case to a head. With the evidence from the storage unit in hand, Detective Mitchell began to piece together the final elements of the case. The storage unit, rented under the alias Mark Peterson, had contained items linking directly to the poison used in Jonathan's murder. Among these items were bottles of the rare chemical, receipts from a specialty supplier, and personal correspondence that hinted at a premeditated plan. The investigation revealed that Mark Peterson was, in fact, Ethan Hartley, the youngest son of Jonathan. Ethan had used a false identity to rent the storage unit, showing a calculated attempt to conceal his actions. Detective Mitchell had been working with a forensic team to verify this link, and the evidence was conclusive. Detective Mitchell arranged a meeting with Ethan to confront him with the findings. The meeting was held in the interview room at the police precinct, where Ethan sat, visibly agitated. His erratic behavior and nervousness were apparent, but he maintained a facade of innocence as Detective Mitchell began the interrogation. "Ethan," Detective Mitchell began, her tone firm but composed, "we've gathered substantial evidence linking you to the crime. The poison used to kill your father was found in a storage unit rented under the alias Mark Peterson, which we traced back to you." Ethan's face turned pale, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His initial denial quickly crumbled under the weight of the evidence presented. Detective Mitchell detailed the items found in the storage unit, including the chemicals and the correspondence indicating a premeditated plan. The forensic evidence was clear. Ethan had the means and motive to carry out the murder. I didn't mean for it to go this far," Ethan confessed, his voice breaking. "I was desperate. Jonathan was suffocating me with his control over everything. I needed the money, and I thought I could make it look like an accident." As Ethan's confession unfolded, the details of his motive became clearer. Ethan had been struggling with financial difficulties and had accumulated significant debt. His relationship with Jonathan had been fraught with tension and conflict. Ethan had felt overshadowed and controlled by his father's wealth and influence, and his frustration had reached a boiling point. In the weeks leading up to Jonathan's death, Ethan had become increasingly agitated. He had tried various schemes to resolve his financial problems, including illicit ventures and risky investments, all of which had failed miserably. The final straw had been Jonathan's refusal to provide further financial support, which had led Ethan to consider more drastic measures. Ethan had meticulously planned the murder, intending to make it look like a natural death. He had acquired the rare poison from a specialty supplier, using the alias to avoid suspicion. His plan had been to administer the poison in a way that would mimic a heart attack, hoping to escape detection and gain control of the family's wealth. The confrontation revealed that Ethan had been motivated not only by financial desperation, but also by a deep-seated resentment towards his father. Jonathan's domineering presence and control over the family's fortune had left Ethan feeling powerless and frustrated. The murder was a twisted attempt to regain control and secure his financial future. The arrest of Ethan Hartley sent shockwaves through the Hartley family. The revelation of Ethan's involvement in Jonathan's murder was a devastating blow, shattering the family's image and exposing the dark underbelly of their seemingly perfect lives. Evelyn Hartley, Jonathan's widow, was left in a state of disbelief and grief. Her calm composure during the investigation had masked the emotional turmoil she was experiencing. The realization that her youngest son had been responsible for the murder of her husband was a crushing blow. Evelyn struggled to come to terms with the betrayal and the impact it would have on her future. Rebecca Hartley, the eldest daughter, was both relieved and horrified by the resolution of the case. While she had harbored her own grievances against Jonathan, the idea of Ethan being the murderer was shocking. Rebecca felt a mix of anger and sadness, recognizing that the family's internal conflicts had culminated in a tragedy. David Hartley, the second child, was similarly stunned. Despite his own financial struggles and conflicts with Jonathan, David had not anticipated that Ethan would resort to such an extreme act. The revelation forced David to confront the complexities of his family's dynamics and the personal failures that had contributed to the situation. Emily Hartley, Jonathan's daughter-in-law, was caught in a web of emotions. Her role in the family and her recent marriage had made her vulnerable to scrutiny. The murder had not only affected her status, but had also forced her to reevaluate her position within the family and her own ambitions. With Ethan's confession and the evidence presented, the legal proceedings moved forward quickly. Ethan was charged with the murder of his father, Jonathan Hartley. The trial was highly publicized, attracting media attention due to the high-profile nature of the case and the dramatic revelations about the Hartley family. During the trial, Ethan's defense team attempted to argue that his actions had been driven by overwhelming financial pressures and personal grievances. They painted a picture of a man driven to desperation by his father's control and his own failures. However, the prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing the meticulous planning and premeditation involved in the crime. The courtroom was filled with tension as the details of the murder were laid bare. Ethan's testimony provided a chilling account of his motivations and the steps he had taken to execute the plan. His remorse was evident, but it did little to mitigate the severity of his actions. In the end, Ethan Hartley was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The verdict was a somber conclusion to a case that had revealed the darkest aspects of a seemingly privileged family. The Hartley family's once prominent status was marred by the tragic events, and they were left to grapple with the profound consequences of Ethan's actions. The aftermath of Jonathan Hartley's murder had a profound impact on the surviving family members. Evelyn Hartley faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life and the family's charitable foundation in the wake of the scandal. The family's public image had been irrevocably damaged, and the personal and financial fallout was significant. Rebecca, David, and Emily were left to navigate the changes in their lives and their relationships with each other. The case had exposed the vulnerabilities and tensions within the family, forcing them to confront their own shortcomings and the legacy of their father's control. Ethan's imprisonment marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Hartley family. The investigation and trial had revealed the complexities of their relationships and the dark motivations that had driven Ethan to commit the crime. The resolution of the case provided some closure, but it did little to erase the scars left by Jonathan Hartley's death. In the end, the case of Jonathan Hartley's murder was a stark reminder of the destructive power of greed, control, and unresolved conflict. The Hartley family story was a cautionary tale of how even the most privileged lives can be shattered by betrayal and deceit.